This video is how to scout and prepare for your opponent in advance of your game. I've got a couple of points on here. The first one is a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you want to paint yourself a picture. You, yourself, and I, by yourself, alone. You're going to break down your opponent after scouting them and start to think about how are you going to instruct your team to stop them? What are their tendencies when they win possession? How many defenders do they play? How many midfielders? How many strikers? How do they get the ball to those players? Do they try to hold possession? Do they try to clear? Do you want to put pressure on them immediately? Can you stop them and cut off their possession and passing to supporting players quickly? Can you win the ball back quickly to start your own attack? Are there any particular players you need to really keep an eye on? Number two is starting your opponent's back third, which is where we will start, and that's where I usually start figuring out how am I going to play these guys. Do they play four in the back? Do they play three in the back when they win possession? Do they go wide? Do they try to swing it back around at times to hold possession when it's not on? Do they try to restart it when things aren't on in the midfield, etc. Number two, we're going to talk about the midfielders, how they play. Do they play with four? Do they play with three? Do they have a wide midfielder? Do they switch the field a lot? Do they have technical players inside that can make your game difficult? Number four is finalize with your defenders against their strikers. And how do their strikers play? How do you want your defenders to play to win back possession? You want a real organized team when you start the game, so that everyone understands the plan of action. Everyone understands how you want to stop the opponent and what things you want to cut out to prevent them from having success. All the key concepts to taking the game away from your opponents, which are fundamental concepts used basically around the world. They're common, they're simple, but we miss them all the time. We don't hold our players accountable, and we're not anal and detailed about carrying them out to the nth degree. So I'll show you how I start when I look at an opponent, and I will typically look at their back line. Do they play with four? Do they play with three? A good time to do that is at the start of the game, the kickoff. So you want to be there at the kickoff if you can to see how they're lined up. And then as the game flows, when that team is attacking, you'll be able to take a look at the defenders and see how many defenders are hanging back and supporting. But you'll be able to tell if there's four, if there's three, there's wide. Do they get forward? Do they stay back? Do they hang back? Same thing with the midfielders. You'll need to concentrate a little bit on the midfielders during that game to find out, do they play with three? Do they play with four? Do they have an attacking? Do they have a holding? Do any of those midfielders go box to box? Do some of them stay? They slide wide? Do they play with wide defenders? Midfielders. Do those midfielders get high? Do they hold? Are they lazy? Are they speedy, fast, attacking? Do they cross well? Those kinds of things. And then lastly, the strikers. Do they play with three strikers? Do they play with two strikers? How do those guys play? Do they work defensively? Do they drop back and get balls? Do they try to get behind you? Etc. Then you form your game plan. So to start with, we will say our opponent is playing with four players. And so whether it's three or four, doesn't really matter, but it's a start for you to figure out how do we stop them. And typically, the ball, by the way, I like your magnet board. I use a magnet board so I can move things around, take a look, and without having to draw and scratch it up and make it the documents becomes pretty cluttered when you're drawing and putting arrows and whatnot. But with a tactic board, you can move things around. You don't like it, you can move it back. You can look at different scenarios because the magnets will stick. You'll have a ball in your magnet set typically. Sometimes the ball's as big as the player, not realistic. So what you can do is you can actually carve that little magnet, chop that little magnet out of the plastic casing, and now you've got a little bit more realistic dimension of the ball. So we'll start with our opponent. Let's say they're playing four in the back. Okay, so different times of the game, they're going to win possession in the back, and they're going to win possession without pressure. So they're going to you're going to find out pretty quickly, and hopefully you've scouted this to see if their coach wants them to hold possession when it's calm, there's no pressure, and then that'll show you what their style of play is and what they've been coached, how they've been coached to play out of a non-pressure situation out of the back. High schools, some guys may want them to get it up top pretty high, pretty fast, very direct. Nowadays, most coaches enjoy the possession style of play, so they will teach their players how to play at the back. So that's what you want to recognize when you're scouting. Once you do that, for example, you say, well, the opponent plays with 4 in the back. We play with 3 up top, or 2 up top, doesn't matter. And we'll do a 2 up top, because a lot of times I do 3 up top, and it doesn't give you a good perspective when someone's playing 2 up top. So today we'll say we're playing with 2 up top, and our opponent wins possession, and typically we've got to deal with these 4 players. If we pressure like so, we allow them to switch the field. Big side of the field means more running for our players. So naturally, what we try to do is after I see that, we'll go into training and say, okay, they're going to play with 4. They're going to, when they win possession and they have time, they're going to play out the back. And first thing we want to do with my 2 strikers is we want one striker to cut off the pass that allows them to switch the field. So now we make them predictable, which is one of the key points we're going to talk about in a moment. Now we make them predictable. We know that they're not going to be able to go this way, so it forces them this way. So the rest of our team can prepare themselves to win the ball back. And then at this stage, we've cut off the side, the square pass. Now this player can begin to cut off this supporting player. So we've got pressure on the ball. This option without pressure is an easy option and a common option. With pressure, it changes things. Now you have a defender with the ball who's a center back. They're not known for their skill with the ball. They're in a risk-free area, and they don't want, the coach won't want them to try to be very clever. And at that stage, we have an idea of how we're going to teach our team to defend in this particular game. So it's basically as simple as that. We have a plan now with 4 up top. If we got, with 2 up top. If we got 2 up top, then we'll probably have 4 in the midfield. So once we get that kind of ironed out, how they will play in the back, we can begin to develop a plan for our strikers, and in the week prior to the game, days prior to the game, we're going to walk them through this scenario and make sure our strikers are on the same page and understand, cut off the square pass, switch in the field, so that our players can get numbers on the ball side. And then second striker, you have to be aggressive in getting out to knock that opponent out, so that takes away that option and puts enormous stress on the opponent. If we can't get there in time, it's okay, but this striker has to know he has to hustle to get over, to get pressure on this player. This striker has to get over to cut off this back pass, because if you don't, you always give him an out, and we all got to run across the field again. And it just burns energy, burns our legs. So we want to make sure the striker pressuring the ball gets there quickly. The second striker cuts off any options in the back. And that's how we'll organize, that's how I'll think through it and figure out that's our plan for playing this opponent when they have possession in the back. And next comes when they have possession in the midfield. So we want to take a look and see how many midfield players are they playing with. And that's where I'll put on the tactic board after scouting, they'll play with 4. they play with two that are square and they're up and down the field evenly, or they play with one holding, one attacking, more of a diamond shape possibly. Do they play with wide midfielders, or do they play a diamond so they have a lot of players around the ball? That will present different challenges for us. So I can actually, the nice thing about the magnet board is I can actually move these things around to figure out what's our strategy in stopping them when they come into the middle third of the field. An example would be if I know they're going to hold possession, play around, and then once they come in, let's say they're playing with a holding and attacking and a diamond, and their ball side midfielders are instructed in the diamond. When the ball is wide, we want you to get wide, so you give a wide option. And when we're holding to support the ball and attacking to come in this area to receive the ball, then if that's my scouting report, then I can turn around and say, okay, guys, my team, we've already figured out what the strikers are going to do. All right, we're going to hold them on this side of the field. We're not going to go straight at them because then it allows that pass. We're going to come from an angle, and we're going to make sure that second striker's cutting off that back pass. So now we've forced them onto one side of the field. We've made the field smaller, and now we're going to talk to our midfielders. If we're playing four in the midfield as well, we're going to talk to our midfielders about shutting down and winning possession in the middle third of the field. And what we want to instruct our midfielders in this situation, it's not about really the midfielders in this particular topic today, but real simply, as we're getting pressure on this ball and player, our wide midfielder needs to read it very early and get out shoulder to shoulder to eliminate this pass into feet. And let's say we come at the wrong angle. It doesn't really matter because regardless, this other ball side midfielder needs to hunt and search what's the next best option for this player. We teach our players to support the ball, left, right, central, and so we teach our defenders to read their best options. Their best options, sorry. Their best options, and I don't usually do this on a trackball. I usually have it on my lap. If we take all of our opponents, all of the defenders away, this player's best option is to go back one, go wide two, go inside three, maybe a striker, maybe an attacking midfielder, four. So we've got maybe four options in this scenario. So we've already talked to our strikers about cutting out one option. Pressure on the ball will cut out another option. Now we need the supporting midfielders to recognize the other two options this player has, and they need to recognize it quickly and then cut off those options shoulder to shoulder. Again, taking away the ball to feet, shoulder to shoulder, taking the ball away to feet. And so now that's our game plan. So we've basically, you have been able to calculate how they play, run through it in your mind, in your eyes, and now you're able to go to your team the day before, 2 days before, 3 days before, and say, this is how we're going to stop them. This is how they like to play. This is what you'll find. This is how we're going to stop them in the midfield. We talked about stopping them up top. Now we've covered the midfield. And now we're going to cover the finality, which is the strikers. I've stretched this out a little bit because the tactical board's small and the magnets are big. Players are not this big on the field. Nevertheless, let's move the ball into the midfield and let's talk about the strikers. So if they're playing a 4-4-2, I've scouted them and I know what we're going to do in the back, right? Let's say they've escaped And now we're dealing with the midfielder with the ball, and how do these strikers play? If they're twin strikers, have they been trained really well, so they play in opposition, one gets at the feet, one gets it in behind. If not, and a lot of times not, especially in high school, and many college programs even, this guy will work independently, maybe make a run in behind, make a run to feet, this guy will just stay. So then we're prepared for that, and we basically are able to take a look at home on our own. What is our strategy for stopping these guys when the ball's in the midfield? And at that point, we'll walk through this in training, and we'll say, okay, back four, midfielders have the ball. How we want to play this is outside back. You're going to pick up the striker should the striker come into your area as we're getting pressure on that ball. Shoulder to shoulder, no balls to feet. Inside back, you're covering the outside back. Should there be a ball in the space, this guy takes off, you've got it, you've covered it in the space, which is a difficult ball to hit. And then you're looking at the other striker and how you're going to deal with that striker. Do you want, at this particular position, it's not very dangerous, and so you want to hold a little bit. Should they get forward, then you can basically review in your head before you teach your team or instruct your team how you want to deal with that. And then, of course, we have this outside midfielder that often they won't get up. They just won't. They can't get up fast enough. At the very highest level, if they do, you've sketched it out, you're prepared, you've got three defenders in here, and you're basically explaining to your team beforehand, be prepared for this player in, and this is how we're going to deal with them. Outside back is going to tuck in and pick them up, hold the line, So the moral of my tactic board story is that you can play with this before the game. If you've scouted your opponent, which you should have done, you should have seen them, you should know how they play, and now you've got a plan of action, and you've rehearsed and reviewed all the various scenarios in your own mind, and you have a plan to take to your players to say, this is what you can expect to see, and this is how we're going to deal with it. And it's basically as simple as that. It's a fun thing to do. For me, I love the game. I enjoy thinking about it, looking about it, and this is how I'll plan out my game before we play an opponent to prepare to stop them. Outside of this, if they have key players, of course, you want to identify those key players. This girl is leading scorer in the league. She's the one that creates all the goals. We stop her, they're going to have a hard time scoring. So you make that clear to your team, and now you get players around her, so she's never alone. There's two players always around her, and you stop her. The last part of that are the key concepts of defending. When you're building your plan, real simple, make them predictable. Try to keep them on one side. Don't let them swing it across back and forth all the time, because it creates a lot of running for your opponent, for your team, especially if you want to win the ball back quickly. Number two, your players need to read and react very quickly. They need to read the body language of the opponent, and if they're swinging it this way and our strikers are cutting them off, they need to read that and begin to react quickly. So while this is slowly developing, you're getting all your players in position to outnumber your opponent, win the ball back. Third part of the key concepts for me is shoulder to shoulder on the ball side. So you don't have, if you're not shoulder to shoulder, you're allowing players to play in to supporting players and hold possession, because this player either has to foul them. If they're not shoulder to shoulder, they can't go in and intercept. They have to stay behind, which allows this player to hold possession and slowly work their way out of it. I prefer shoulder to shoulder so that they've got a toe poke on the ball. We stop we stop possession. Lastly, well, not lastly, number 4, stay connected. We want all of our team connected within 10-15 yards. 10-15 yards this way, so we want everybody basically almost on this half of the field when they have possession. And then we want our strikers, midfielders, defenders all 10-15 yards away. Really shrinks the field. It makes it very difficult for them to get through us. That's what we call staying connected. And then lastly, when you stay connected in your lines as well as your width, you shrink the field. Now the field has become this big, which is very difficult for our opponent to play in. And that's it. There's a few other details. Call me if I can help you. I love to talk tactics. And wish you the best of luck. And thanks for watching the video.